All right, thank you so much for staying with us. Now, South Africa has to wait for the president to study the report that looked into the feasibility of free higher education. The Fees Commission was appointed in January last year after an eruption of violent protests by students around the country calling for fees to fall. President Jacob Zuma says he will make the findings available to the public in due course. But joining us now is Kefentse Mkhari. He is the former president of the Student Representative Council at the University of Wits. Kefentse, good morning to you and thank you so much for coming through.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much indeed. Let's just go back a little because now the year is almost over and yes, we've had the Minister for Higher Education, Dr. Nzimande, saying that it would actually be up to the different tertiary institutions to decide on tuition hikes, but the increase, whatever it is, it shouldn't go beyond the 8% mark. How has the year been for students throughout?
It has been a very difficult year. You know, after a protest, you expect some sense of change in terms of, you know, how students are being assisted financially. But we have seen worst year because you'd remember that NFSA started its central student-centered model, which went wrong in all aspects, you know, because first of all, they did not have the capacity to deal with the centralized applications that they were receiving. So you still have students that have not been responded to in terms of financial aid. So it has been a very difficult year because we had to play cat and mouse with NFSAs, you know, and one would expect that after a protest you would have at least, if not getting closer to free education, but the systems that are there to assist financially would be more efficient. So we have seen the direct opposite of that, which has been very difficult, and hence we had students still sleeping in libraries, still sleeping in computer labs, students still without accommodation, and some of them having to deregister because they realize that we are not going to have the money.
Yeah, so all in all, are you saying that the fees must fall protests in jail, they were all in vain?
Yeah. To be quite honest, they were all in vain. There were certain victories that were there. I mean, for instance, you look at insourcing. At least at our institution, Wits, you know, the process has been completed because that's one of the things that we were protesting for. But in terms of the students, nothing has really moved. Actually, things have gotten worse.
Yeah, you still talk of the hardships that students had to go through. But I remember the ministry saying that students who could not afford would be supported. So are you basically saying that the plan was very much ineffective?
Yeah, look, I mean, you have politicians. They always make promises, but they cannot fulfill them. And as I said, that we have seen a worst case scenario in terms of NFSAs, which is, you know, the major financial aid mechanism that is in place. So when you have it going all wrong, it means you are deepening the hardships that students have to go through, because as we speak, there are still students who have not been responded to, while they are able to make a mistake of paying out 14 million to one particular student, you know. So we have really had a difficult year in terms of, you know, issues of fees in general.
I think we would have to invite NSFAS to come and respond, of course, to the allegations that you're putting through. But now let's just focus a little on this commission, or the Fees Commission. You were part of it, of course. You went and made your representations there. But you came out very disgruntled and concerned. What is your outcry?
Look, as we were having this discussion earlier, that I think that this should have been a parliamentary discussion, you know, that would immediately inform the legislative framework so that we can see implementation with a sense of agency. Because first and foremost, we had a problem with the commission in terms of its mandate, that it was still looking into the feasibility. When we say, look, but the feasibility has been looked at, it was the very same ANC that adopted a resolution in 2012 to start implementing, in fact, in 2013. We haven't seen that happening. So for us, the commission is a delay tactic, and in fact, it does not show a sense of agency from government side to start implementing, because now you have the commission having done its work. you still have the president who's going to report, then you're going to have the parliamentary discussion. So the implementation is going to be delayed, you know. Whereas I think the better thing that he should have done is to take the discussion to Parliament immediately to say, look, we have looked into the feasibility, although material conditions have changed because the time at which we looked at this was previous to now. What can we do to start implementing, especially and specifically for the poor and previously disadvantaged students, so that we can start dealing with some of these material conditions that students have to go through year in, year out. I mean...
All right, so basically your concerns is this will take forever, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it will.
So do you have trust on this commission?
I don't. As a student leader, I don't.
Why not?
And I think we have stated this over and over to say we don't have trust in that commission because even the people that went there to make submissions, even ourselves, you could already see there's a certain bias that this commission is working with. But
what did you pick up? What bias are you talking about?
Look, things such as wanting to, wanting the banking sector to be in charge of, the loan system, because what they want ultimately it's sort of a loan system. And as students were saying, in fact, we have that and it's not working the way it's supposed to. We want free education free. We don't want a loaned system. So they have a certain bias, and you would know with the ISFAP model that was done by the CEO of NFSAS, Mr. Ngasana. There's a certain bias around that. In fact, they are more biased to that model than anything else.
But you also had an opportunity to make your submissions.
Yeah, we did.
Why did you not counter what they said?
Look, we did. I mean, as I said, that the bias, even when you're there, when you start saying something different to that, you are not given too much attention, and I think people who submitted progressive, submissions that were speaking to what we're calling for would also, bear testimony to this, to say there was a certain bias in that commission. And we wouldn't be surprised if the outcome would come out advocating for a loan system. We wouldn't be surprised.
Let's talk about that outcome.
Yeah.
The commission is done with its work now. What do you think is contained in that report?
Well, it's going to be very difficult to predict, but one thing for sure, I'm telling you that there will be advocacy for some sort of a loan system. Things like, let's make NFSAS better, let's restructure it and all of that, which is going to be far contradictory to what we're calling for, because we feel that it is high time that the state started taking education seriously, not only as a social changing agent, but also as a state apparatus, because we haven't seen that. We haven't seen government taking education as a state apparatus towards its strategic missions, its strategic objectives.
All right. Kefentse, I have to leave it at that. Should the recommendations not go in line with what you want? Are we likely to see more protests? A quick one on this.
Yeah, I think unrests are going to be there.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming through. Kefentse Mkhari is the former president of SRC at Wits University, talking to us about the fees commission that was appointed by President Jacob Zuma. Now they're done with its work. We're waiting to see what the report has. Let's take a break.